Hi, this is a tutorial for the devil hat sewing pattern. So you printed your pattern at 100% scale. You measured your scale box, should measure 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters, and then you decided which design you're going to make. So either the pointed hat or the rounded hat with the straight horns or the crooked horns. You're going to see at the bottom of each page there are little references, so letters and numbers. The letters, they go vertically and the numbers, they go horizontally, like this. You're gonna have a little blank edge around your pages. That's normal. When you put your pattern together, you want to overlay the lines like this. Overlay the pages to make the lines meet, and then you tape your pattern together and you cut along the lines. This is a fabric I suggest using. It's the one I used for this example. It's a cotton, and I washed it and dried it before doing this example. So here I want to show you the raw edge and the selvage. So selvage is located at the bottom and it looks like this, and the raw edge is located to the right, and that's another example. So selvage is located on the left and then raw edge is at the bottom. When you cut your pattern pieces, you're going to see a little reference for the grain line. So remember, grain line runs perpendicular to the raw edge and parallel to the selvage. So that's how you want to position your pattern pieces. And then a lot of your pattern pieces are going to have notches that you have to either cut little snips to identify or draw with a fabric pen. And it should look like this. So that's how I make mine. I make little snips with my scissors. And then you also want to mark your darts. So you want to do this on the wrong side of your fabric, and ideally use a fabric pen, but I use a pen because I'm lazy. I just poke little holes along the darts, and then I draw through it, and then you have your dart reference. So first step, you want to sew your darts together. So you just fold your darts right, so your fabric is right sides together. You make the lines of the dart meet. So you kind of make the lines of the bottom meet and then fold it all the way to the middle point. And then what I like to do is I like to take a pin. I kind of pin it through like this, and then, oh, it doesn't match on the other side. So you kind of want to keep the first side pinned, but move the other side of the fabric and then pin it again. That way this is a way to make sure that your line, it meets on both sides of the fold. So we want to sew this with a straight stitch along the line, and we're going to do this for all the 4 side hat patterns. So this is what it looks like. You really want to iron it too. Looks like this. Nice and flat. So now you want to make... So this is the step where we pin and sew the middle hat parts to your side hat parts. So I'm making this example on the pointed hat, but it's the exact same step on the rounded hat. So you want to make the notches meet. So like this, I'm putting the side of the hat with the middle of the hat right sides together. I'm matching the notches first. And I pin this, and then I pin it all the way to the front and then all the way to the back. And you should look like this when the 2 middles are pinned to the 4 sides parts. You have 2 hats like this. You're gonna sew along the edge with a straight stitch with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then you want to press it real nice with an iron. So it looks like this. Then you take your hat ties, and you're gonna sew it to your little hat part you made, right sides together. You want to put the thinner side of the tie to the hat, and then you sew with a straight stitch with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you've done that, you should have 2 hats like this. So you might want to take a moment here and make sure that all the seams, like all the wrong sides, are on the same side. I don't know if that's clear, but that all your seams are kind of, you can see them on the right side before you go any further, because that's where a lot of people make mistakes. So here you want to put, so I ironed that also, the ties. I did a nice iron. You want to make sure at every step of this project that all the seams are flat before you move on to the next step. So now you're putting the one hat inside the other one, right sides together. and we're gonna sew all around it. I didn't pin because I'm used to it, but you might want to pin it to make sure that, especially all the seams, they match on both hats. Be careful around the curves. So now you want to leave a little opening because at the end we're gonna want to turn this hat inside out, basically. So what I do is I find a nice flat space. So that's the part of the hat next to your cheek. It's kind of long and flat. So I do a back stitch, and then I leave a portion of maybe 6 or 7 centimeters not sewn. So I just move it. I don't cut my thread, I keep it in the machine, and then I start my seam 6 centimeters further, I do a back stitch, and then I keep going as usual. So I just keep sewing all around the hat with a 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way. When you get to a corner, you might want to put your needle down, turn your fabric, and then go on the other direction. That's the best way to get a nice crisp edge in your seam. And now what you're gonna want to do is cut all the excess fabric on all the sharp edges. So all the corners, maybe the point of the hat, you want to cut the point, and then at the bottom of the ties, you want to cut the corners. And then every part of your hat that is curved, you're gonna want to do little snips like this, because it's gonna make the curve more flexible. Just test it out, you'll see what I mean. It's gonna look nicer when you turn it inside out and you iron it. So now it's the time to put your hat inside out. So what I like to do is I kind of cut some of the seam allowance of the tie part of the hat, or else it's really hard to turn inside out. So I use my zigzag scissors, but you could use regular scissors, it's fine. And then from your opening, you're gonna want to turn your hat inside out. So you just push your fabric through. But then for the ties, I highly suggest you get this tool. It's not that expensive. It's going to save you a ton of time. So it's like a long metal thingy with a hook. So you pass it through. And then what I did is, because I didn't sew super tight, I had room in between my threads. So I kind of hooked the seam from the front. And then you kind of gently pull the tie part inside out, like this. And then you use the same tool to kind of gently poke the corners to make them nice and crisp. And there you go. And you want to do the same. If you're doing the pointed hat, you want to do the same to the pointed part of your hat, so that it's nice and pointy, or else it's going to look kind of round and not nice. So this is what it looks like, starting to look like a hat. We're gonna iron this, and then we're gonna top stitch it to close the opening. Yeah. I didn't mention this earlier, but before you iron your hat, do a little test to see how your fabric reacts to heat. Because some fabric, they might melt or they might change colors or whatever. I worked with a cotton and it was fine, so I didn't need protection, but maybe you want to put a pillowcase on top of your fabric just to make sure, because it could ruin your project and then you have to start over and it's a pain. This is a very, very long and tedious task, ironing your hat, but it's super important. It's gonna look nice in the end. So it looks like this when you're done. So yeah, take your time, just push all the seams out before you iron, and it's just gonna look way more professional. It takes time, but it's worth it. And then we're gonna top stitch it, maybe, I don't know, 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters from the edge. And then you're gonna go all the way, you're gonna sew all around your hat, and on top of the open part as well. So it's gonna close the open part at the same time. Okay, time to make the horns. So this is the cone horn. So I decided to double the fabric because somebody commented and said that their horns looked wonky. I think that's the term they used. And it might be because the fabric was too thin. So anyway, I wanted to compare a single layer and 2 layers. So here I am and just folding it right sides together. And then I'm gonna sew the edge with a half a centimeter, so 5mm seam allowance. I'm gonna leave an opening just like we did with the hat. So I sew maybe 2 centimeters. I leave like a 2 or 3 centimeters unsewn. I backstitch before, and then I start my seam 2 or 3 centimeters further. I backstitch and then do it all the way to the front. Of course, I'm hiding what I'm doing. Anyway, yeah. So it looks like this. So again, I'm doing 2 layers because I want to test the difference. But it looks like this. You're gonna do this for the 2 horns if you chose the cone horn, and then those are the bases, but we're gonna do these later. We're gonna hand stitch them because it's a pain on the machine. And this is how you make the crooked horn. So you put the 2 pieces, so you need 4 of those if you decide to make the crooked horns, 4 of those. This one I'm doing with a single layer of fabric. So pretty much the same. You're gonna sew all around it with a half a centimeter seam allowance. Take your time around the curve. What I do is I put my needle down, I lift my foot, and I move my fabric. Just take your time and make sure you have a nice curve. So you sew it, you do a back stitch, you leave a 2 or 3 centimeters opening, and then back stitch and finish your seam. Et voilà. Should look like this. So I'm doing this with 1 single layer of fabric, and then those are the bases. We're going to hand sew them later. So this is what the cone horn looks like finished, and this is what the crooked horn looks like. So the cone horn is a bit wider at the base, and it's straight up, and then the crooked horn kind of is crooked. So those are your 2 options, and I don't see a lot of difference in the flimsiness of it. Anyway, so this is how we make the crooked horn. So you sewed the main part earlier on the sewing machine. It has a little opening, and we do this because we're gonna sew the base, and then we're gonna put the pillow stuffing through this opening on the side, and then we're gonna close it. So yeah, the base is gonna go like this. Okay, so to help you, I suggest you use your paper pattern and then cut on the second line. So that's more or less the seam allowance, you know. So you're kind of cutting off the seam allowance like this, and then just trace it on your fabric. So again, I'm using a pen, but I highly suggest you use a fabric pen. So that way you have your reference, and then this is gonna go at the bottom of your main horn part. Oh yeah, so I'm gonna draw little references. So you fold it in half, and then you kind of mark the halves and the quarters of the circle, and then that way you know what goes where, because it's tricky, you know, sewing a round shape. So I know 2 of the references are going to go on the seams, and then I put seam to seam, and then it kind of gives me the middles of you know, it gives me the quarters. I don't know if that's clear. Gives you the, yeah, so those are like the, you know, each mark is going to go either on a seam or a pin, and then that way it's easier. So we're working with super small fabric pieces. It's tricky. Take your time. Be careful not to poke yourself with the pins. Like this, and then just pin it. There you go. And then you're gonna hand stitch the base to the main horn part. using a straight stitch. So straight stitch is pretty easy. You just go through the fabric, and then so along the line you make your needle go through the fabric along the line, and then you kind of make it go back on the line, maybe 2 millimeters to the left from where you started, and then you go back in between, and then a little bit to the left. Yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining it super well, and to be honest, it was so blurry, this scene. I don't think it's super clear, but just Google it, you know, straight stitch. You're gonna find an easier example. That this is what it looks when it's done, and then you're gonna want to turn it inside out like this. I used a pair of scissors to poke the tip up. Obviously be careful if you're using something sharp. Be careful not to damage your fabric. Take your time, go slow. It looks like this. And then you want to stuff it with either pillow stuffing or yarn. I use yarn, some cheap yarn I have. And it's pretty much the same result, to be honest. So I just cut a little chunk, and then I push it either at the bottom or the top. And then you really want to stuff it. So you put some, you push it. You see I put quite a lot. And so this is what I in my opinion is enough. So it kind of, you know, it bursts out, push it in. And this is how to avoid it looking a kind of wonky. Anyway. So now we're gonna do a ladder stitch to close this opening. So you wanna take your thread and needle, make a knot at the end, and then you wanna start your seam a bit further where the fold is. So now I'm kind of like folding the seam allowance shut. You could use a pin, but I decide to use my finger. And basically what you do is you go under one side, and then exactly on the other side you do the same. You go under, kind of like a ladder, just like the name. Again, if you want a closer, less blurry example, you can go on the internet or YouTube and find a good example. It's a new camera. We're still learning how to work with each other. And then when you're done, you just make a knot. And what I like to do is you just pass your needle through your horn and then cut the excess thread. That way it won't, it's gonna make your knot more secure in the end. It won't like, it shouldn't open. Okay, so now it's the step where you put your hat on and then you decide where your horn is gonna go. So I think that looks good, but you can put it really, listen to your heart, put it anywhere you feel comfortable. And then when you find the area, you just put a pin on the middle of where your horn is gonna go. And now you want to match this location on the other side. So you kind of want to fold your hat in half. Make sure to make the seams meet, so that, yeah, and then you just is it clear? You just match the center of your horn. Now you take your paper pattern, you fold it in 4, and you cut it in the middle like this. And you're going to put your paper pattern on top of the 2 middle parts that you marked with a pin. So just like this. And then pin it in place. And then you can use chalk to mark the circle, or use a contrasting thread and do a loose straight stitch all around, and this is going to be your base for sewing, whip stitching your horns on your hat. So this is going to be just a reference. When you're done, it should look like this. And now it's time to sew your horns on your hat. So as best as you can. It doesn't have, it's not a surgery. As precise as you can, just kind of lay the base of your horn on the reference you sewed. And then you're gonna wanna do a whip stitch. So you kind of wanna go through your hat and sew and pass the thread and needle at the very base of your horn. So where the base meets the main horn, you know? And then you go back on your reference. Like this, make it nice and tight. The closer your stitches, the stronger your horn is going to be. And then there you go, this is how it looks. And if you use a matching thread, it's not going to show if you're a bad hand sewer like me. Okay, that's it. This is how to make the devil hat. Thank you a lot for watching. If you're interested in seeing my other sewing patterns, you can find me on Etsy for now. Maybe I'll have my own website later. But on Etsy, my name is Sylvia Patterns. And yeah, I plan on making more patterns in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Bye.